This is a short video that's going to show you how to use PowerPoint as an easel to do your exercise number 2 in Explore Chicago Architecture, and generally how you can use PowerPoint to form up much more interesting presentations by including one or more images in each slide, and how to edit each one of those images to be the proper size and the proper orientation and composition that you want. Let's take a look. In this brief video, I'm going to show you how to use PowerPoint as an easel to accomplish a number of things you might otherwise have to use a photo editor to do. The reason I'm suggesting you think about PowerPoint is that you already have it, and learning how to use it better will benefit you in your academic career. Let's take a look at a bunch of pictures. They're sitting right now in the My Pictures folder. And within that, in a folder I just called National Geographic Large, because I got these from National Geographic. I purposely wanted pictures that had a very large dimension to them. For example, if I take a look at this by right mouse clicking here in Windows 7 and View, and I go to Details, one of the things I can see is the dimensions in pixels of each of these pictures. The dimensions, you'll see, are quite large. The screen is only, in this case on my laptop, about 1300 pixels wide. So any one of these pictures, if I were to display them at their full size, these pictures would be much larger than my screen. Now, depending on the version of PowerPoint that you have, either 2003 or 2007 or 2010, when you bring a picture like this into a PowerPoint slide, it may automatically be adjusted to fit on the slide, or it may actually be much larger and you'll have to make it smaller. We'll have to make these pictures smaller in any case for our purposes, so let me show you what I'm going to do with these. These are the pictures I'm working with. I'm going to open up PowerPoint. First of all, I'm going to get rid of these boxes that have the place to add titles. I'm just going to highlight it, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to press delete. I'd like a nice clean screen to work with. I also don't need this bunch of slide presentations here. By getting rid of them, what I see will be a little bit larger. So what I'm going to do is simply insert picture. Now I have to find where the picture is. It's in Pictures, that's where I put it, and I've actually created a subfolder called National Geographic Large. I've got all of these pictures laid out, and in this version of Windows, Windows Explorer is trying to segregate these according to the title. That's handy or not, depending on how you might think about things. Let's do this. I want to take this picture and insert it. Now you'll see here, even though this picture we saw was much larger, it's coming in size so that it fits. But maybe in working with this picture, it's too large for my purposes. You may want to be putting several pictures on this page in the form of collage or just in the form of a collection of pictures. In one class that I teach called Explore Chicago Architecture, Exercise 2 deals with photographs taken by students that have to be cropped and composed in a way that's interesting and follows some rules, but also we need to get onto this one sheet, this one slide, 8 pictures arranged in some nice grouping. Well, it's going to mean no picture can be this large. So let's address that first. If I click on the picture and I grab it by the corner and move diagonally, I can make the picture smaller. It's smaller for the purpose of presenting it, that is, seeing it on the screen. It's not smaller physically. That means that if this was a large picture and it took several megabytes to store, by doing this, I don't make the file any smaller. If I collected up 8 pictures like this on one slide and they were each 3 megabytes in size, I'm going to have 24 megabytes of storage used to store this one slide. 24 megabytes is kind of large to be emailing. Most people's email could not accept a file that large. So I'm going to show you in just a little bit a very easy way that we're going to make everything that you assemble here much smaller, much more susceptible to being emailed, much more susceptible to being submitted as an assignment. Let's suppose that is one of the pictures I wanted, and I have to fit 8 on the page. I may want to make it even smaller. Let me insert that picture again just to show you a couple of things. I can insert the same picture multiple times. I want to demonstrate with this something you don't want to do. You don't want to make a picture smaller by doing this. If you do this, you may or may not wind up with a decent result. Let's go back just a bit though. I can always undo each action. Supposing I only wanted this fellow as the primary thing in the picture and not all of this. Can I do that? Yes, but it's not an action that goes like this, which would simply distort the proportions. Now he's become very skinny. This is a common mistake people sometimes make in attempting to fill out a slide or isolate something, and it distorts things. It distorts the proportions. Now the height is much greater than the width in terms of the ratio between the two. And you see, this is the original picture. This is a distorted view. This is not really acceptable. I'm going to, once again, click the delete key and get rid of that. I'm going to insert that picture again and show you the right way to go about it. If it's just this person that I want, the right thing to do is to focus on it by clicking on it, and you'll notice Format. And if you go all the way over here, you see Crop. When I clicked on Crop, you see how the edges change? These things, a little sideways T appears when I put the cursor over it. Now if I go like this, I'm not changing the proportions. What I'm doing is changing what part of the image is actually presented. And supposing I wanted to shrink it a little bit vertically too. Crop once again. I can take multiple crop actions until I click somewhere else. So I can do this and isolate just a piece of the picture, just like this. Now when I click here, I get this back as an image, and if I wanted to resize it, and without distorting the proportions, resize it. Kind of interesting. Same picture, treated differently. Let's take in another picture now. In this case, I'm going to take this picture of a car. It's very large. It's really much larger than the area of this slide, but PowerPoint in Office 2007 has resized this for me automatically so that the edges will fit. Now, it didn't make it fit this way, because that, of course, would have distorted the proportions. If that was your intent to fill out this slide, you might get away with doing this because that adjustment is not so great as to have distorted the proportions here. It still kind of looks right, but it actually is not a preferred technique. So what you really want to do with these things is probably not fill out the slide in this way, but handle the issue of getting the image you want in a more correct way. What I'm going to do is remove this resizing, remove this resizing. You see that undoes one action every time you click it. Going back to the point of your last save, well, that's an important point right now. We've never saved this. It's still called Presentation 1. If I go to save it, I have to decide where I want to put it, and let's put this back into Pictures and back into the very same folder, National Geographic Large, and let's just say this is my Demonstration 1. Now let's take a look at what we want to do here. We would like to reduce the size, but I think I would also just like to get this car and not all this empty road. Of course, this has been formed according to some rules of photography. This horizontal line, being about 1/3 down, seems to actually be fitting the rule of thirds. And the way this thing curves around, even though it's rather subtle, this curving around is sort of a way of drawing your attention in that direction. So in and of itself, this is not necessarily a poor photograph. But let's suppose for my purposes, I just want the image of the car and it cut off about there. If I highlight this, go to crop, now I can grab this and do something like this. You'll notice a slight pause there because this is a large photo and it's taking a long time in processing to remove this from view. I can also move this one up if I wish. This one doesn't seem to make any sense to move down because then I would clip off here, either top of the car or something of the bushes. So I'm going to undo that and perhaps just move this thing with a crop, move that thing just a little bit over. Now I have this picture, but it's too big. I'd like everything about the width of this, if it can be. In fact, let's take this one and make it just about that width. So let's do this. Not quite going to fit that way. A little bit too large, I'd say. Let's make this one smaller. Let's make this one smaller. And I'm going to continue to do this until I get this just about the same size. There is this sort of a snapping effect where PowerPoint will help you get this to be the same. It's not completely smooth in terms of how it does the sizing. And here it might be kind of nice in this collection to have about the same width of white border all the way around. Let's take this one and let's put this about here. But maybe that's really too large. Let's make it smaller too. Something like this. And sort of like that. Let's take in another picture and do a little bit more. I've gotten quite a few pictures here. And I think what I would like to do is illustrate something for you that's a little bit more advanced. In fact, two things. First of all, let's take this picture of a mosque and insert it. Now, it wasn't as large as the other ones. That's why in sizing this to fit, PowerPoint hasn't put it out to the edges, horizontally or vertically. Probably its original size was not huge, and then maybe it was. I can't really tell from what PowerPoint has done, but either way, it's not too material to me. The problem here is that it's slightly crooked. You see, this tower and these minarets are not quite pointed vertically. Well, what can I do about that? Well, I can do something like this. I can rotate this very slightly, like this, and attempt to straighten that out. But you'll see it's kind of blocky here how PowerPoint does this. It doesn't necessarily let me rotate this very smoothly. It's going to sort of notch up to maybe something like this, which makes the problem worse. So let's do this. Let's see if we can somehow play with this just to get this perhaps a little straighter. We might even go up here to View and Zoom and go to something larger, like 200%. Now if I do that, I may gain a little bit in terms of the ability to be precise about this movement, but it doesn't look like. It's not letting me be too precise about that. It seems to want to make it go a certain increment. Well, I don't think that's going to do us very much good. So in this case, I'll go back to fitting it in the window, and I'll have to decide, how do I really want to handle that? Am I going to try and make any correction, or simply live with the picture as it was taken? I think I'll just have to live with the picture since I can't make an adequate correction with PowerPoint. I could perhaps do a better correction with the regular photo editor, but that's not the point here. How would I crop this to make it look a little more interesting? I think I might do something like this. Click on Format after having highlighted it. Click on Crop. Let's do this. Let's say this tower here that isn't completely revealed is really a little distracting. Let's see if we can chop out that rail a bit, and let's see if this might make some sense. Now that might be a little bit different perspective. It tends not to make the out of plumb, those towers, as noticeable. Maybe now I can move it just a little bit. Well, I'm not so sure that that's much benefit. If it were, however, notice the whole picture has cocked over, and I can't actually do much about it. Or can I? Let's try. First of all, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Here is where it gets a little sticky, trying to make a correction using PowerPoint, which is not really intended to be a photo editor. Let's see what we can do. Is there any control here that will help? It doesn't seem like. It really doesn't seem like any of these things will help us align this properly. But what are we really trying to do? What we're really trying to do is to not make the entire picture, the shape of it, look like it's cocked over. And if we think a little bit outside of the box, there's a way we can get the effect we want, a little bit roundabout, but it certainly works. I've inserted a box. It's not the color I want to block something out. So I'm going to format that shape. I'm going to say line color, no line, fill, solid fill, but white. Now what do I get? Well, I get something that you can't really see, the size of which I can adjust, and I can copy it by doing right mouse click, copy, right mouse click, paste. And if I paste this in down here, and I take that same shape, copy it, paste it again, but this time rotate it around vertically. I can put it over here, and notice what I'm doing. I'm really blocking out parts of the image. Now I just did a Control-C and Control-V to insert it, and I'm making it a little narrower. And now I'm going to put it over here on this side, and I can do a fine adjustment by pressing the Control key and the left arrow key. You see, I can do this and sort of get it just where I want it. Okay, now that picture doesn't look too bad. It looks like the minarets are standing vertically, and I've been able to compose the picture pretty much the way I wanted it. I don't think I'd want this edge to come in anymore, because then I chop off the corner of this building, which might not look too appealing. And I really don't think I want to chop the sky off anymore, because having the sky kind of emphasizes how tall these towers are. But here's something else. You can't just take this and move it now or resize it, because it's kind of hemmed in by these shapes. Here's something else you can do in PowerPoint, though. I'm going to go here and left mouse click. That's not a good thing to do, because now I've marked that. How about I go a little bit outside of it, left mouse click, and I draw this box. The reason I'm doing that, everything within the box, wholly within the box, will be marked in this way. I don't think something on this side is marked as I want it to be, because there is this too. Let me do that again. Let me lasso everything. Now, everything in there, the four blocking out parts and the picture itself, they're all marked together, and if I right mouse click on any of them and group, I can group them. That means I can move this around. Now notice when I move this around, you're seeing that all that blocking around the edges is affecting it. In some cases that blocking is too wide. I can make it smaller. Even though this is all grouped, it will still work. And maybe that's a good thing to do, although that's not the only cure. Aha, but here it's getting messier to do. It seems to be affecting the image as well, at least a bit. You see, I can't separate my actions from changing the size of those blocking surroundings from distorting the image. So I'm going to undo, undo, and undo. That's undoing every action I took. Let's do this though. Let's say we want to get this, our standard distance from the picture next door. I could right mouse click on this group and send it to the back. You have to picture this as being layers of images on this slide, and what I just did was put this behind all the other image layers. Now if I do this, you see it doesn't matter if that extends over the edge, but I have got this kind of to the point where this is going to look about the right spacing, and I can once again control and with the left arrow key make a fine adjustment on it as long as it's marked. Let's save this. Let's make a test of what this slide looks like by clicking on this presentation. Well, that's looking pretty good. I've gotten this isolated the way I wanted it, sized much larger. It's like this is just an expansion. Happens to look kind of interesting because it looks like this fellow's lining up to take a picture of these things to the right. The car is pretty big. Perhaps that's my intent. And here I seem to have straightened out the minarets and composed this the way I wanted it. Now I'm going to press Escape. Let's do one more picture and see if we can find anything even more interesting to do here. Let's take this one and insert it. And I'm going to first of all make it smaller. And let's say what I really want is this little guy here, not the man, but this little guy here. And I want him to kind of fill up this area, but to be vertical about it. This is going to be a bit challenging. First of all, let's do this. Let's do a crop, and let's just isolate the image that I'm intending to use here. Now, I can turn this vertically, and here, since the motion is so much, anything that approximates vertical placement will be better than not. But now I've got a really extreme problem. Now, perhaps I want to make this a little bit bigger, but this is not the way to do it. See, I'm really distorting this thing now. The way to do this would still be to grab this and move it this way or this way diagonally till I can get that the size I want. Okay, now what am I going to do? I can repeat the same technique that I used earlier, which is to block out parts of this. Maybe a little bit tricky because of the way this thing is overlapping, but let's try it. Let's insert shape. Let's take a rectangle. Let's make it by formatting it with no line and a fill that's white. Okay, now what can I do with this to put it about where I want the upper part of this picture? And I want to get rid of all that. If I send this thing to the back, it's not going to accomplish what I want. I sent that to the back, so it's behind that picture. How about sending this to the back now, so it's behind that? Gets a bit tricky, you see, because here the border from this is interfering with it. Well, just to be quick about it, let me move this picture down a bit, so at least I can try and accomplish what I'm out to do here. So here I'm getting some of this effect. Here I'm getting the whole effect of blocking that off. Now I can repeat this. I'm going to copy and paste, and I'll turn it this way so I can go down here and do the same thing. And I will have the same problem with this. So I'm going to send this to the back. Then I will send this to the back. And now I've got that side kind of cleaned up. Let's take this one here, copy and paste, and move it down here so I can just get a little bit of trim, and I'm going to adjust the position with the Control key and the down arrow. And then the last one, let me copy this and paste it. And I want to do this side, and there's no real complication on this because there's nothing to the right. Now the question is this really framed up the way I want it? I think so. It's kind of close. I've got about the same spacing on either side, but I've got one more problem. Let's test to see how it's going to look. Well, it's looking pretty good, except what about this corner? Well, there's not really too much I can do about that using PowerPoint. What I'm going to do here, though, is another little trick. I'm going to insert, once again, a rectangle, and I'm going to make the rectangle just big enough to take care of what I want to do here. Sort of like that. But what I want to do is to format this so that I get no line and the fill kind of close to a brown, I think, because that's kind of what I've got there. Let's see what happens if I send this to the back. Interesting. It just about takes care of the problem. If I guessed with a solid color here that's kind of like the background, this isn't really very objectionable at all. You hardly would notice that this has been filled in. With a photo editor, you could have filled that in manually, but this is just a handy way to do it using PowerPoint. Let's see what we've got here. One more thing we would like to add. Test it to see what it looks like. It's not quite lined up properly with things here and here, but if I spent more time doing that now, I'd probably make this video a bit too long. This could be aligned a little bit better. Let me press Escape. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to insert text box and draw a box right here. And I'm going to say this is a demonstration of how you can do some workable image editing and formatting using just PowerPoint 2007 or 2010. Even earlier versions would work, but this is kind of what I'm looking at here. Let's highlight all of this. Let's make it just a little bit bigger. And we might want to adjust the size of this box so that it fits nicely, and maybe we don't get so much of this kind of a carryover to the last line, or maybe we have to live with it. Well, probably not. We can do something like this, Control key, left arrow key, I can move this around, and it might be nice for me to label this saying who I am and the date 10/4/2011. There's other things I could do with this box if I wanted to. This labeling is fine. If you wanted to make it a bit fancier, you can right mouse click on that and format it. One thing that I usually do in labeling slides for instructional purposes is the fill. I would make the fill really stand out, and then I would make the lettering stand out better by making it white. So something like this, when you present it, really does draw attention to what's going on here, because this is unlikely to be very similar to any part of the images. Kind of unusual. This has red, 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 so prominent. But in any case, this is something that labels it and is quite easy to see. Having done that, I think I might use the Control key and the right arrow just to line it up a little bit better. It's nice if things align at least according to some lines. It doesn't align there, but could maybe look better if it did. And here it's gotten a little bit too tight. If I shrink this, I get this other problem. So the best I can do might just be something like that. I'm going to save this. I'm going to look at it. And here's the important thing. How do I get this to be a manageable slide? I don't want to send this as a PPTX file to somebody. Then they're going to see all this messiness. It's going to be very large. As PowerPoint, they would have to have PowerPoint to open this, and you can't make that assumption. Here's the cure. Not only do you save it as PowerPoint, but you go here and you say Save As, and you go down here where it says the Save As type, and now you choose something else. You choose JPEG. What this is going to do is to create one file, one picture of this size, and I say Save. It does ask me this question. It asks you this whether you have one slide in this file or many slides. If you have many slides in the file, you click this one and it creates a folder for you, and it puts the slides in there, naming them slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, and such. If you only have one slide, as I have here, you can click the current slide only, and now it will create for you in this folder this demonstration JPEG, the name of my slide. You see here it's 86 kilobytes. Now how does it do that? Well, it does that because look at the size, 960 pixels by 720. This will easily fit on a screen. And if I take a look at this and preview it, this is what I've got. That is the whole slide. You may not be able to see the distinction here in the coloring. This is a light blue background. This is where the slide starts. This is where the slide ends. And the same thing happens here. I have one image that is exactly what I formed up, regardless of how I got the image, with blocking out borders here, with cropping, with some form of filling in like this with a brown rectangle behind it, regardless of how I got that, and this lettering. This is one picture. It's one image, as if you had taken a picture of the screen. This can be, for students in Explore Chicago Architecture, this could be what you submit, properly labeled with little boxes like this for every one of the pictures, according to what Exercise 2 requires you to picture. I would suggest you think about these kind of techniques for doing your simple photo editing. They can return big benefits to you in the preparation of any kind of a slide set, because you can combine images relevant to the topic and words, that is bullet points or other kinds of words, for other types of presentations, and make your presentations much more interesting. For academic submission purposes, you definitely would want to, on some concluding slide, attribute where you got these things from. I got these from National Geographic, and I tried not to use anybody that had a recognizable face. That's why in this image I cut out the fellow who might be recognizable. This guy, I don't think anybody will recognize. In your case, what you really want to do for any academic submission or any kind of a presentation you make anywhere, you might consider taking some of these pictures yourself. That is, if you're working in an organization, take a picture of the building in which it's housed or the office or something, so that you actually personalize this whole thing to the organization. And I would suggest actually not using clip art for these things, because clip art is kind of cutesy perhaps once, but some people overuse clip art and it just becomes kind of a gimmicky sort of an amateurish way to try and illustrate something. It's like you copied an old comic strip and you're trying to rehash it for some current purpose. Not too good. I think actually people would much more appreciate seeing something contemporary, something that they would recognize. And of course, if you make your own images, your own digital camera to take pictures like this, and you crop them carefully, you can come out with a much nicer personalized product for the subject matter or the organization than you would just by using stock photography. I hope this gives you some ideas on how to form up a PowerPoint slide that incorporates many images, how to clean those images up so that they better suit your purposes, and how to format the images in such a way that they follow some rules of photographic composition, even if the original image didn't follow those kinds of rules.